Hey guys, tonight we sink into a world both dazzling and dangerous. A world where beauty was chased with powders, potions and pastes, so strange you'll wonder if people had secretly signed a contract with the underworld. Imagine standing in a drafty medieval chamber, tapestries billowing, candlelight flickering, and a woman calmly smearing her face with a white dust so toxic that a modern lab would slap hazard warnings all over it. Yes, lead powder. You're about to discover that in the Middle Ages the quest for porcelain skin wasn't just a preference. It was practically a life mission. And here's the cheeky warning: if you actually tried these secrets, you probably wouldn't survive the week. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and the time of night down below. I love seeing where and when you're listening. Now dim the lights, let quiet settle in, and ease yourself into the calm rhythm of tonight's story. You glide into the scene, watching the powdered masks being prepared. The prized ideal was skin so pale it resembled porcelain, a sign that you didn't labour under the sun. The common tool? A chalky white cosmetic made of finely ground lead. Women carefully dusted and patted it onto their faces and necks and even their chests. The result? A flawless, ghostly glow that shimmered under candlelight. To them, it was beauty incarnate. To us, it's pure nightmare fuel. Because lead wasn't just toxic. It could slowly eat away at the skin, cause hair loss, and poison the blood. But here's the kicker. Some thought those effects just meant you needed more powder. The irony of these rituals is impossible to ignore. Imagine your cheeks breaking out in angry sores and your solution is slathering on more of the very paste causing it. Historians still argue whether people knew the true risks or genuinely believed it was harmless. On one hand, medical texts of the time did note strange side effects. On the other, beauty manuals praised the brightness it gave. It seems vanity often drowned out warning bells. To apply the mask, women sometimes mixed lead powder with vinegar or rosewater, creating a thick paste that dried into a smooth surface. Picture yourself there, feeling it tighten against your skin like a modern sheet mask but far less forgiving. You'd smile at your reflection in a polished metal mirror, satisfied with the creamy blank canvas it gave you, ignoring the way your lips tingled or your head felt heavy afterward. And then there's the fringe tidbit. Some recipes suggested adding ground alabaster, or even powdered bones to improve the texture. That's right, the beauty aisle of medieval Europe occasionally raided both geology and graveyards. This is where you might chuckle, thinking about a medieval influencer saying, "Today's beauty hack? A touch of grandma's femur powder." Of course, this obsession with whiteness wasn't confined to Europe. Similar lead-based cosmetics were used in ancient Rome and even centuries later in Elizabethan England, where Queen Elizabeth I herself famously painted her face with Venetian ceruse, a luxurious form of white lead. You can picture her regal presence, her skin luminous under torchlight, though the very paint that crafted her image may have hastened her decline. The process wasn't just vanity, it carried a social weight. Pale skin meant wealth, nobility, refinement. A ruddy, sun-darkened complexion screamed field worker. So to walk into a banquet with your face powdered like freshly fallen snow was to declare your rank without speaking a word. The paradox? Those same powders quietly stole away your health, yet that trade-off seemed acceptable when your reputation was on the line. And here's where modern echoes creep in. Think about today's skincare obsession. Acids, injectables, lasers. We scoff at medieval women brushing poison onto their faces, but are we so different? You probably know someone who risks side effects for the glow of perfect skin. History may laugh, but it also points a mirror back at us. One recorded case tells of a wealthy noblewoman whose skin developed ghastly cracks and sores from years of lead masks. Servants whispered about witchcraft, while physicians blamed imbalances of humours. Did she stop? Of course not. She simply applied thicker coats, believing the mask itself would conceal the flaws it created. Like a painter endlessly layering over a crumbling canvas, she covered, until reality could no longer be ignored. The sensory experience would have been unforgettable. Imagine the gritty feel as the powder stuck to damp skin. The faint vinegar tang mingling with rose petals, the faint metallic taste that crept into the back of your throat if a bit dusted down from your cheek. You'd walk through stone corridors, head held high, thinking you looked divine. And maybe you did, for a few hours until the mask began to flake, leaving ghostly trails on your collar. One medieval manuscript even suggested that lead cosmetics could preserve the freshness of youth. Knowing what we know, that's almost darkly comic. Preserve youth? Maybe in the same way formaldehyde preserves frogs in biology class. But again, vanity whispered louder than logic. And while we might roll our eyes, consider this. There were alternatives, though less fashionable. Some women used rice powder, flour, or ground chalk. They may not have gleamed as brilliantly under candlelight, but they also weren't slowly poisoning themselves. Still, those who opted out risked looking less refined, which in a courtly setting could mean fewer alliances, fewer admirers, fewer opportunities. What would you have chosen? Safety or status? It's strange to imagine that behind the elegance of portraits, behind the delicate lace veils and jewelled headdresses, many faces were hiding an invisible secret, a cosmetic that was both shield and saboteur. As you settle deeper into this story, you sense the irony. Beauty was never just about allure. It was about power, class, even survival. You probably wouldn't have survived these masks, but for a fleeting evening, under golden candlelight, you would have looked every bit the part of nobility. And that, to them, was worth the price. You move seamlessly onward, still standing in that medieval chamber, but this time your eyes drift from the poisonous white masks to a smaller ritual. On the edge of a carved wooden table, a bowl of eggs sits waiting, their fragile shells gleaming in the firelight. You watch as a woman cracks one open, carefully separating yolk from white, letting the thick, slippery albumen slide into a shallow dish. She dips her fingers into it and smooths it across her cheeks, forehead and neck, until a glossy film covers her entire face. This was her facelift, centuries before anyone thought of Botox. As the egg white dries, you notice how it tightens, pulling the skin taut. If you've ever left glue on your hands as a child, you know that shrinking sensation, the way it stretches every pore and makes you want to wiggle. To her, though, this was the height of elegance, a temporary illusion of youth, as if her face had been wrapped in invisible silk. Medieval beauty guides often recommended this method, praising its ability to smooth lines and give cheeks that glassy moonlit glow. Of course, there's a catch. Egg whites smell faintly of sulphur. You can imagine sitting at a banquet, chin lifted high, face glowing in torchlight, while your neighbours try not to wrinkle their noses at the faint whiff of rotting hay drifting from your direction. This was a beauty trick that worked best if you kept admirers at arm's length. And yet, it endured, because the payoff was undeniable. The smooth, luminous surface gave women a fleeting confidence, the same way modern face masks do when peeled away to reveal a temporary glow. Now here's where the story gets juicier. Some recipes suggested mixing egg whites with honey, almond oil, or crushed herbs, making the paste thicker and stickier. You might have sat there, your face coated in a gooey sheen, buzzing flies circling your head like you were the most glamorous beekeeper in town. Did people mind? Apparently not. Historians still argue whether these mixtures were rooted more in medical belief, like balancing bodily humours, or purely cosmetic invention. There's one curious account from a 14th century Italian household manual that recommended egg whites for calming burnt skin. Scholars debate whether this meant literal burns from fire or the subtler burn of sun damage. Either way, it shows how blurred the line between skincare and medical care was. Imagine reaching for the same remedy to soothe a blister and to impress a suitor. And here's a quirky fringe detail. Some women swore that egg whites could be applied to the eyelids to make them sparkle. A dab here and there before a feast, and suddenly your eyes caught the light like polished glass. Never mind that blinking must have felt like peeling tape from delicate paper. You endured it because the shimmer sold the illusion. The social context makes it even more fascinating. Egg whites were cheap, available to nearly anyone with access to chickens. Unlike the exclusive lead powders reserved for nobility, this ritual slipped into peasant cottages as easily as it did into noble courts. A farm girl might smear it on before a village festival, while a duchess could layer it beneath costly perfumes and veils. In a rare twist, this was one medieval beauty secret that cut across class lines. But here's the humour in it. Picture yourself, stiff-faced, sitting across from someone while the egg dries. You can't smile or laugh without cracking it. A medieval date night might have gone something like, "My lady, your beauty is radiant tonight," and you responding with nothing more than a tight-lipped nod, terrified your face will flake into a snowstorm of albumin dust. Romance, medieval style. Mainstream physicians of the day did take notice. Some recommended egg whites not only for cosmetic benefit, but also for drawing out impurities. They described it almost as a medieval pore strip, claiming it could lift dirt and excess oil, and in fairness, they weren't entirely wrong. Even today, skincare recipes online tout egg whites as a natural way to tighten pores. The difference. Modern dermatologists also caution that it can dry your skin out and, oh yes, possibly spread salmonella. The more things change, the more they stay risky. Imagine the sensory world of the egg white mask. The cold shock as it first touches your cheek. The way it stiffens as minutes pass, turning every blink and frown into resistance training. The faint eggy scent clinging to your hair and pillows afterward. In the flickering candlelight, your face might shine like porcelain, but beneath it, your patience was being tested. One anecdote tells of women who added ground pearl dust into the mixture, an extravagance meant to signal extreme wealth. Think of the absurdity, crushing precious gems into paste, mixing them with barnyard eggs, and slapping them on your face. It's as if a modern billionaire said, "Oh, my skincare routine, just caviar mashed into yogurt." You laugh, but you can almost hear the smug satisfaction in the voices of medieval ladies saying the same thing. The scholarly debates circle back here. Were these treatments truly effective or mostly psychological? Historians argue whether the tightening effect really reduced wrinkles long term, or whether it was a fleeting trick of the senses. Perhaps it was placebo wrapped in ritual. Still, the ritual mattered. It gave women agency in an era when so little else belonged to them. A pot of egg whites was, in its way, empowerment. So you sit back, letting the mask dry, picturing the entire medieval household moving around you. Servants whispering, firewood cracking, bells chiming in a distant chapel. Your skin feels taut, almost fragile, but you also sense yourself slipping into their world, where beauty was equal parts craft, chance, and sheer determination. And you realise this. For all its strangeness, this ritual carries echoes into your bathroom mirror today. After all, isn't half of modern skincare still about strange goos, waiting games, and hope that the glow will last until morning? You drift deeper into the medieval courtyard, where the air smells faintly of incense, sweat, and something more pungent, something earthy and alarming. Your gaze catches a clay jar sitting by a shaded stone bench, its lid decorated with crude scratches of crocodiles. The servant lifts the lid, and the stench hits you. Dung. Yes, crocodile dung, carefully collected and dried, ready to be smeared onto faces as a kind of sunscreen. If you thought egg whites were strange, brace yourself. This one is straight from the annals of "you probably won't survive this." The reasoning behind it feels almost logical in its own twisted way. Medieval women feared freckles and sun-darkening more than most plagues. Pale skin wasn't just fashionable, it was social currency. And with summers baking fields and courtyards, women needed protection from the harsh rays. So some turned to a paste made of crocodile droppings, often mixed with mud or oil, and applied it across the skin as a barrier against the sun. Imagine the gritty, sour, sweet stench clinging to your cheeks while you're trying to appear elegant. That's dedication or desperation. Historians still argue whether the crocodile dung recipe was widely used, or more of a medical curiosity noted in manuscripts. Some point to its origins in ancient Egypt, where dung of various animals was occasionally used in medicinal pastes. Did this practice trickle into medieval Europe through translated texts and medical lore, or was it merely a rumour repeated by scandalised chroniclers? The debate lingers, but the image of a noblewoman walking in a rose garden while wearing reptilian waste across her face is almost too vivid to dismiss. The sensory details are unforgettable. Picture the texture, crumbly yet sticky, like wet clay. The smell? Acrid, with a sharp bite that would overpower even the strongest rosewater perfume. And the look? Well, unless you had a particularly artful hand, you risked appearing more scarecrow than swan. Imagine someone leaning in to compliment your flawless complexion, then reeling back because your secret glow smells like the Nile Delta after a flood. And yet, there was a strange logic at play. Crocodile dung was thought to have cooling properties, aligning with the medieval medical belief in balancing hot and cold humours within the body. If freckles were seen as heat rising to the skin, then slathering on something that symbolised the opposite, cold, moist earth was believed to counteract it. Whether it worked scientifically? Doubtful. But within their framework of humours and cosmic balance, it made perfect sense. The quirky tidbit here is that crocodile dung wasn't only for skin. Some texts suggest it was used in early contraceptive recipes. Yes, you heard right. Women were instructed to insert it as a barrier, believing its thickness would prevent conception. A beauty cream and a contraceptive, though in both cases the effectiveness was questionable and the discomfort undeniable. One wonders how many women grimaced in silence, hoping for miracles where none existed. Now, humour me with this image. A medieval woman carefully applying her dung paste before a feast. She sits at the table, face gleaming faintly greenish-brown, while minstrels play in the background. A suitor approaches, leans close, and recoils slightly, unable to name the smell but certain it's not roses. You can almost hear the whispered gossip. She must be enchanted, or cursed. Meanwhile, practical alternatives did exist. Some women used simple veils to shield from the sun, or lotions made from vinegar, herbs, and milk. These smelled less offensive and looked far more discreet. But veils could not always be worn indoors, and milk-based lotions spoiled quickly. So the bizarre crocodile concoction stuck around, at least in lore, as a remedy for those truly committed to pale perfection. One medical manuscript even hinted that the dung had mystical properties, because crocodiles were tied to ancient river gods. Whether that was poetic metaphor or sincere belief, you can sense how mythology and medicine intertwined. Was this skincare or superstition? Scholars still debate, leaving the practice somewhere between history and rumour. Imagine yourself in the role of a lady-in-waiting, tasked with grinding and mixing the dung. You lean over a mortar, pounding the dry pellets with pestle and oil, gagging as the dust fills your nostrils. You mutter under your breath, "I'd rather milk goats for a year." Yet when you hand the finished paste to your mistress, she applies it without flinching, convinced it's her ticket to lasting youth. And here's where the modern callback sneaks in. Think about sunscreen today. We slather on white zinc oxide pastes, chemical-smelling lotions, and even sticky sprays. We accept the odd textures and scents for the sake of skin protection. Maybe it isn't so far from crocodile dung after all, though admittedly less repulsive. The difference? Ours actually work, and you don't have to fend off flies while wearing them. By the time night falls in this courtyard, you imagine the dung paste drying on faces, cracking slightly as women smile under the torchlight. The illusion of glowing, pale skin remained intact, for now. Beneath it, however, one wonders if their bodies whispered in protest, much like the faint voices of scholars today, debating whether this was myth, medicine, or madness. It's grotesque, it's fascinating, and somehow it's comforting to know that no matter how far back you go, humans have always been willing to endure the bizarre in the name of beauty. You drift into another chamber, this one smelling faintly metallic, with a wooden stool set near the window. A woman sits there, her sleeves rolled back, and beside her stands a physician, or at least someone playing the part, with a leather pouch of instruments dangling at his side. On the table gleam a few small knives, a shallow bowl, and, to your unease, a jar of fat, wriggling leeches. This is no beauty salon in the way you know it, but in the medieval imagination it was exactly that. Tonight, you watch how bloodletting became a path to complexion, how the pursuit of pale skin bled into medicine, literally. The belief was simple, yet alarming. Too much blood made the body hot, flushed, and prone to blemishes. Pale, cool skin, by contrast, signalled health, purity, and high class. So, if your cheeks turned ruddy, or your forehead bloomed with angry spots, the answer was to drain a little life from your veins. Doctors and beauty seekers alike turned to leeches or lancets, nicking the skin to let blood flow. Imagine the sensation. Cold metal or the slippery tug of a leech attaching, followed by the slow warmth of blood running into a bowl. If you didn't faint, you might even believe you felt lighter, cleaner, more refined. Historians still argue whether women pursued bloodletting purely for cosmetic purposes, or whether it was part of broader health rituals. Some evidence suggests noble women scheduled treatments before festivals or weddings, determined to look pale and luminous. Others argue that the practice was simply folded into general medical care, its beautifying effect more of a happy side effect than the goal. The truth may lie somewhere in between, blurred like the line of blood itself. The mainstream logic came from Galen and Hippocratic traditions. According to humoral theory, excess blood, one of the 4 vital fluids, had to be balanced to prevent illness. Too much, and you risked redness, fever, or outbreaks on the skin. Draining it meant cooling the body, restoring equilibrium, and as a nice bonus, leaving your face pale as ivory. Physicians prescribed it, monasteries recorded it, and ladies endured it, all convinced they were tending both health and beauty. But here's the stranger twist. Some believed the type of blood removed mattered. Forehead veins were pricked for headaches and blemishes, while leeches placed behind the ears were thought to refine one's facial appearance. Imagine sitting in your stone-walled chamber, candlelight flickering, as tiny creatures suctioned onto your temples, leaving faint marks. Your servants reassure you, "My lady, by morning, you shall glow." Glow might not have been the right word, now for the fringe tidbit. A few texts suggest that menstrual blood itself was seen as a kind of natural purging, leading some to argue that women were already self-balancing. In fact, one medieval physician dismissed women's complaints about blemishes, saying they had no need for extra bloodletting. Others disagreed, claiming it was doubly important because women were inherently moist and cold, and therefore prone to imbalances. The scholarly squabbling on this matter is endless, but the image remains vivid. Men writing treatises about why women should, or shouldn't, bleed themselves to stay beautiful. Picture the aftermath. A noblewoman gazes into her polished bronze mirror. Her cheeks are pale now, almost waxen. She dabs a little rosewater over the puncture mark to mask the sting. At the banquet that evening, her skin glows softly under torchlight, and she's praised for her delicate beauty. No one sees the faint dizziness behind her smile or the way her pulse quickens when she stands too fast. Vanity often outweighed discomfort. And of course, there's humour to be found here. Imagine you're courting someone who's just had a leech session. You lean closer, whisper a compliment, and notice a faint wriggling in her hairline that she forgot to remove. Romance dies instantly. Or picture the awkward moment when the physician proudly announces, "We've removed just enough to keep your cheeks pale, but not enough to topple you." Not exactly reassuring bedside manners. Some accounts suggest women added a cosmetic layer afterward, powders of chalk, rice, or lead, to enhance the effect of the bloodletting. In other words, once you drained your vitality, you plastered something toxic on top. Double jeopardy, medieval style. Still, the desired look was achieved. A face so pale it seemed sculpted from marble, untouched by toil or sunlight. The debate among historians circles back. Was this truly beauty-driven, or simply medical care repurposed? Maybe the answer lies in how people talked about it. Medical texts explained the why, but letters and diaries whispered the how. A noblewoman writing before a wedding mentions a letting to soften my look. That sounds less like curing disease, and more like prepping for a grand entrance. From your vantage point sitting in the dim room, you imagine the physical sensations vividly. The prickle of the blade, the cool trickle, the faint buzzing in your head as your body adjusted. The smell of iron fills your nostrils, mixing with the beeswax candles. It isn't pretty, but in their world it was part of the performance of beauty. And here's the callback. You remember the powdered lead masks? Pair them with bloodletting, and you've got a 2-step process guaranteed to kill your skin faster than the sun ever could. Yet both persisted, century after century, fueled by the relentless pursuit of perfection. You can't help but smirk. Imagine pitching this as a medieval spa package. Leech lift and lead glow, only 2 florins. People would line up, because in every age humans will suffer a little, or a lot, for beauty. And while you might shake your head now, you can also sense the eeriness. Under different guises, we still do the same today. The firelight fades, and now you find yourself in the private chambers of nobility, where the scent is unmistakably sharp, tangy, and almost enough to make your nose wrinkle. Vinegar. A gilded copper tub sits in the centre of the room, steam rising from water mixed with generous pours of sour wine gone bad. You watch as a noblewoman lowers herself into the bath, her skin instantly prickling from the sting. This wasn't just a cleaning ritual, it was a beauty secret, one soaked in both luxury and discomfort. Vinegar baths were believed to purify the skin, strip away blemishes, and tighten the pores. leaving the bather refreshed and, more importantly, radiant for the court. To medieval minds, vinegar carried the power to cut through grease, odours, and even bad humours. Imagine the sharp sting against your skin as you sink in, the sourness curling into your nostrils, mixing with the scent of herbs and smoke from the hearth. Not exactly the lavender bubble bath you're used to, but for them, this was refinement. There was also status woven into this sour soak. Only the wealthy could afford the indulgence of filling an entire tub with liquid that could otherwise be used in kitchens or preserving food. To sit in a vinegar bath was to quite literally steep yourself in your privilege, a signal that you had abundance to spare. Picture the gossip in the corridors. The Duchess soaks herself in vinegar twice a week. No wonder her cheeks look like rose petals, and everyone nods, half admiring, half resentful. Historians still argue whether vinegar baths were more medicinal or cosmetic. Some point to the medical writings of the time, which described vinegar as cooling, cleansing, and able to chase out fevers of the skin. Others argue it was mostly a beauty fad, the sour sting, thought to peel away imperfections. Perhaps it was both, a crossover remedy where medicine and vanity bathed together. One quirky detail shows up in old recipes. Nobles sometimes infused their vinegar baths with rose petals, rosemary, or even slices of lemon if they were particularly wealthy. The result must have been both beautiful and bizarre. A steaming sour salad bath with petals floating on top, stinging your cuts while perfuming the room. Imagine soaking in that, listening to minstrels outside, pretending you felt pampered while secretly fighting the urge to sneeze. There's even a tale of Isabella of France, Queen Consort of England in the 14th century, who was rumoured to favour vinegar rinses for her face. Did it really keep her skin porcelain smooth? Or was it just one of many whispered exaggerations around royalty? Historians debate the evidence, but the story lingers, adding a touch of glamour to what was otherwise a very bracing ritual. Let's be honest, it wasn't comfortable. Vinegar stings when it touches tiny cuts or sensitive areas. Sitting in a whole tub of it must have felt like marinating in discomfort. But to those women, that sting was proof it was working. Much like today when someone tells you the burn means it's effective. You might laugh at the parallel, but your own skincare shelf probably has something acidic, a glycolic peel, a vitamin C serum, that isn't too far from the same concept. Now, for the humorous picture, imagine a medieval lady relaxing in her vinegar bath, eyes closed, when her servant accidentally mistakes it for leftover cooking liquid and tosses in a few carrots. Suddenly, your beauty ritual looks like the beginnings of a stew. My lady, you're glowing. Yes, because she's halfway pickled. The mainstream medical endorsement made vinegar baths even more popular. Physicians praised vinegar as a universal cleanser. It disinfected wounds, preserved food, and, so they claimed, preserved beauty too. They warned, though, that too much soaking could dry the skin excessively, leaving it cracked. The solution? Apply oils or ointments afterward, often made from almonds or olive oil. Imagine stepping out of the sour bath only to be rubbed down with greasy layers of nut oil. The sensory experience was a roller coaster. Sting, dryness, then slickness. And here's where the scholarly debates grow thorny. Some believe vinegar baths were linked to religious practices of purification, almost like a ritual cleanse of both body and soul. Others dismiss that as overreach, saying it was simply a beauty indulgence. You can picture the scene either way. A noble woman sighing as sour water runs down her shoulders, convinced she's washing away sin, or at least yesterday's sweat. Not everyone could partake, of course. Peasant women rarely had access to such excess. Their beauty routines might include washing with simple water or herbal infusions, but vinegar baths remained largely a courtly luxury. That exclusivity only added to their mystique. If your rival at court looked especially radiant, the whisper would be, "She has vinegar tubs at home." The sensory details bring it to life. The sour steam fogging up the chamber, the faint sharpness catching in your throat, the feel of wooden planks beneath your wet feet as you step out, chilled air rushing against newly tightened skin. You rub your arms and wonder, was it worth it? In their world, the answer was almost always yes. And here's the callback to bloodletting. If draining blood was one way to purify, vinegar baths were another. Both stung, both were unpleasant, but both left you looking pale and clean, which meant powerful. The more you hear, the more you realise medieval beauty wasn't about comfort, it was about control. So you sink into the scene with them, the water lapping at your shoulders, the sour tang hanging heavy in the air. It may not soothe you, but for a medieval noblewoman, it was the closest thing to luxury, strange, sharp, and unforgettable. The story drifts onward, and now the chamber grows darker, lit only by a few sputtering candles whose flames catch the gleam of something silver resting in a tiny vial. A lady in waiting picks it up carefully, tilts it, and lets fall a single droplet onto the tip of a fine feather. You lean closer, curious, until the realization sinks in. It's mercury. Yes, the liquid metal that slides across surfaces like quicksilver, now being delicately applied to the eyes. This was one of the strangest and deadliest beauty tricks. Droplets of mercury to make eyes sparkle. The allure of bright, glistening eyes was powerful. In an age when the rest of the face might be hidden beneath veils, powders, or hoods, the eyes shone as the centre of expression, the window to both soul and status. To have eyes that glittered like glass under torchlight was the mark of charm, wit, even seduction. And so, in some courts, women risked everything by letting tiny drops of mercury sting across the whites of their eyes, believing it would make them gleam wider, clearer, and more captivating. You wince just imagining it. The sensation must have burned like fire, a flash of pain followed by watering tears. Yet within minutes, their eyes did appear brighter, irritated to a gloss, reflecting light unnaturally. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or confined to certain exotic circles, perhaps carried from Arabic medical texts where mercury had long been studied. Some claim it was more rumour than reality, whispered about to shock listeners. Others argue that enough references survive to suggest it was truly used, even if rarely. Either way, the very thought of it leaves you blinking in sympathy. The mainstream appeal of mercury wasn't confined to eyes alone. Physicians of the time prescribed it in small doses for treating parasites and skin conditions. It was thought to cleanse, purge, and bring balance to the humours. If mercury could kill lice and fleas, why not also kill dullness in your gaze? The logic seems twisted to us now, but in the medieval framework it was entirely plausible. And here's the bizarre tidbit. Some texts suggested combining mercury with egg whites and rosewater to create a paste for eyelids. Imagine smoothing that toxic cocktail across delicate skin, hoping for a subtle shimmer while unknowingly feeding poison into your bloodstream. The risk was invisible, but the shimmer was immediate. You can almost hear the sigh of satisfaction. Ah, my eyes catch the torchlight tonight. Picture the scene at a banquet. A lady tilts her head, her eyes glittering more brightly than anyone else's, the reflection of candles dancing unnaturally. Suitors notice, rivals whisper. She may not realise that behind the admiration lurks a slow death, tremors, fatigue, madness. But in that moment, her allure reigns supreme, and of course humour finds its way here too. Imagine the awkwardness if a drop slid too far and left her squinting painfully, trying to maintain conversation while tears streamed down her cheeks. Or worse, if her suitor mistook her watering eyes for swooning affection. She weeps at my beauty, he might boast, never realising she's just enduring the sting of mercury. One medical manuscript described mercury as the lively metal, capable of awakening sluggish spirits. You can almost laugh at the irony. It awakens spirits all right, usually by slowly driving its victims to tremors and hallucinations. Historians debate whether medieval women recognised the dangers at all. Some argue they must have, because side effects were too obvious to ignore. Others counter that the short-term glamour outweighed long-term consequences, especially for those whose lifespans were already shorter than ours. Imagine the sensory world of the practice. The sharp metallic tang rising into the air as the vial uncorked. The cold, heavy droplet sliding onto your eye's surface, followed by a sting like embers scattered across glass. The flood of tears blurring your vision, then, suddenly, the brightness, the unnatural sheen. You blink into the mirror, satisfied. But beneath the surface, the poison begins its slow, silent work. It wasn't only women who indulged. Some men in courts, eager to appear alert and youthful, were rumoured to use the drops as well. Picture a knight applying quicksilver before entering a feast, hoping his gaze looked keener as he told tales of battle. Even warriors weren't immune to vanity. The scholarly debates circle endlessly. Was this truly a common practice, or a whispered exaggeration spread by chroniclers eager to portray women as dangerously vain? There's no clear answer, yet even the possibility is haunting enough to show how far people might go for beauty. And here's a callback. You think of the vinegar baths from earlier. Sour sting on the skin, metallic sting on the eyes. Different ingredients, same story. Pain and poison wrapped up in glamour. The pattern becomes clear. Medieval beauty wasn't gentle. It was sharp, risky, and always a gamble between allure and affliction. Now, as you imagine the court chamber once again, you see the faint gleam of women's eyes catching the torchlight. They laugh, they gossip, they flutter their lashes. To everyone else they look alive, enchanting. To you, watching centuries later, they look like they've bartered pieces of their health for a fleeting sparkle. The torches burn low and your attention shifts to another peculiar sight, one that might make you laugh before it makes you shudder. Across a long oak table, women sit with jars of glue, tweezers, and what looks suspiciously like tiny patches of fur. You step closer, squint, and realise the truth. Mouse fur. Yes, actual mouse hair, snipped, shaped, and glued above the eyes to form new brows. Welcome to the medieval eyebrow salon where rodents became reluctant stylists. The obsession with eyebrows was nothing new. In some periods, the fashion was to pluck them thin until almost invisible. In others, thick arching brows were considered alluring. But plucking often went too far, and when brows refused to grow back, women had to improvise. The solution: cut bits of fur from small animals, mice being cheap and plentiful, and shape them into arching strips. A dab of resin or gum arabic held them in place. Imagine sitting perfectly still as your maid pressed rodent fur onto your forehead, whispering, "There, my lady, perfection." The effect under torchlight might have been convincing, thick glossy arches lending expression to otherwise bare faces. But you can picture the hazards. What if the glue melted in the heat of a summer banquet, and your furry brows slid down your cheeks like fuzzy teardrops? Or worse, if a mouse hadn't been cleaned well enough and carried a flea? Your pursuit of beauty suddenly becomes an invitation for plague. That's the sort of risk you probably wouldn't survive, though the women of the day bore it with stubborn pride. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or a satirical exaggeration. Some sources describe it with such detail that it seems believable, while others hint that it may have been a joke aimed at mocking women's vanity. Were noble women truly gluing fur to their brows, or were chroniclers just poking fun? The evidence isn't conclusive, but the very possibility is enough to make the story endure. The mainstream idea behind it was simple. Eyebrows framed the face, and a face without them seemed ghostly or sickly. Religious manuscripts even warned against women looking unnatural without brows. So, when plucking, shaving, or illness robbed you of them, replacement became not just vanity, but social necessity. And in an age without synthetic wigs or cosmetic pencils, animal fur was the easiest stand-in. A curious tidbit appears in some accounts. Nobles sometimes dyed the fur with soot or crushed berries to match their hair colour. Imagine a lineup of ladies, each with little mouse hair strips dunked in bowls of pigment, waiting to be pressed onto their foreheads. A medieval beauty salon suddenly looks like a bizarre crafts workshop. The sensory picture is vivid. You feel the sticky gum brushed across your skin, the faint tug as the fur is pressed into place. It itches, slightly, but you resist scratching. The smell of resin mingles with the faint musky scent of the animal, masked as best as possible with rosewater. You glance into your bronze mirror, nodding at the transformation. No one will know your brows are borrowed, unless one slips off mid-dance. Of course, humour has to surface here. Picture a courtly ball. As the dancers whirl, one lady's eyebrow detaches and sticks to her partner's cheek. He smiles, oblivious, while others stifle laughter behind jewelled fans. Or imagine sneezing and blowing both brows clean off your face in front of the entire hall. Not exactly the elegance you were aiming for. There's even evidence that mouse fur brows became a symbol of sorts. To have them suggested you cared enough about fashion to endure the indignity. If your rivals at court saw you with smooth, hairless brows, they might whisper about your poor health. But with shiny arcs of fur, you were back in the game, rodent or not. Modern echoes are hard to miss. Think about eyebrow extensions, microblading, or stick-on brow sole today. The medieval woman pasting mouse fur isn't so different from someone in your century, drawing on bold arches with a pencil. The tools have changed, but the desire is timeless, framing the eyes, commanding attention, shaping identity. Scholars debate whether satire coloured many of these reports. Some chroniclers may have exaggerated to critique women's vanity, turning an occasional oddity into a widespread scandal. But even if only a few women ever glued on mouse fur, the fact that the story persisted tells you how powerful and strange the pursuit of beauty could be. Now, as you watch in that dim chamber, the ladies sit with perfect patience, waiting for their brows to set. A hush fills the air, punctuated by whispers and giggles, the faint squeak of a mouse still scurrying in its cage. One woman rises, her new arches gleaming, her pride restored. In her mind, she has reclaimed her allure. In yours, centuries later, you're torn between laughter and disbelief. And as you think back, you recall the mercury droplets from the last chamber. Toxic shimmer for the eyes, rodent fur for the brows. Step by step, the face was rebuilt with danger, absurdity, and just enough brilliance to dazzle. The candles flicker lower, and your journey carries you into another corner of medieval beauty, one that smells sweet and earthy but feels a little too sticky for comfort. On a carved table lies a clay jar filled with golden honey, viscous and glimmering in the light. Beside it, a smaller pot of snail slime, carefully scraped and collected. You pause, eyebrows raised. Yes, honey and snail slime, combined into one of the strangest skincare concoctions you've yet seen. Women in medieval households used honey as a staple for softening the skin. Thick, nourishing, and naturally antibacterial, it was praised in herbal manuals as a sweet purifier. Smooth it over your cheeks, and it clung there like a second skin, pulling impurities from the pores. To them, the tacky sensation was part of the magic. If it stuck, it worked. Imagine reclining on a wooden bench, face covered in honey, trying not to swat away the bees buzzing a little too close for comfort. Beauty, as ever, demanded sacrifice. The snail slime, though, is where things veer toward the uncanny. Herbalists and apothecaries insisted that the mucus trails left by snails carried soothing, healing properties. Some women gathered snails in little clay pots, then gently prodded them until they oozed, scraping the slime with sticks to add into facial masks. The resulting mixture promised softness, healing of scars, and a dewy glow. Picture yourself with a sticky, glistening paste across your cheeks, wondering if you just turned your face into a dessert plate or a garden wall. Historians still argue whether snail slime was actually used broadly, or whether it remained a fringe curiosity. Some argue it was a rural practice, handed down by folk healers who swore it could mend burns or smooth roughness. Others believe the association with fertility and regeneration made it appealing at courts too. The debate lingers, but either way it shows just how far people were willing to go to imitate the natural world in their beauty rituals. Mainstream accounts of honey's benefits abound. Physicians and monks wrote that it could draw out corruption and heal wounds. Applied to the face, it doubled as both medicine and cosmetic, soothing redness while enhancing glow. A noblewoman could plausibly justify her honey mask as both healthful and fashionable, and when combined with snail slime, the mix was thought to intensify its effect, binding the sweetness of bees with the earthiness of snails, a harmony of creatures in service to vanity. Now here's a quirky tidbit. Some recipes suggested leaving live snails to crawl across the face, their trail serving as natural applicators. Imagine lying still on a stone bench, feeling tiny creatures inch across your skin, leaving cold ribbons of slime. You'd resist the urge to twitch while your maid praised your dedication. Would it make you radiant or just vaguely traumatized? Hard to say. The sensory experience was unforgettable. Honey warmed slightly on the skin, tightening as it dried, while snail slime cooled it with a damp silken sheen. The smell was faintly sweet, with undertones of damp earth. When you finally rinsed it off with rosewater, your skin might feel softer, though sticky residue lingered stubbornly. And as you stepped into the hall afterward, perhaps you believed your cheeks gleamed like polished ivory. Of course, humour slips in too. Imagine dozing off during your honey snail treatment, only to wake up with a snail still crawling toward your hairline. Or worse, sneezing mid-mask, sending honey droplets flying across the chamber like golden shrapnel. Servants probably had to scrape goo from tapestries more than once. One story whispered from French court circles claimed that Catherine de' Medici experimented with snail-based remedies for burns and blemishes. Was it true? Scholars debate whether this was an exaggeration by her detractors, eager to paint her as dabbling in witchcraft. After all, snails creeping across a noblewoman's face could look suspiciously like sorcery in an era when superstition simmered under every surface. Honey and snail slime also carried symbolic weight. Honey was tied to purity and divine sweetness, while snails represented regeneration. To combine them was to embody renewal, an alchemy of beauty, medicine, and meaning. Whether the science held up didn't matter, the symbolism did. Modern echoes are uncanny. Walk into a beauty store today and you'll find snail mucin serums and honey-based creams promising hydration and healing. The medieval women weren't entirely wrong, though their methods lacked refinement and perhaps refrigeration. You can almost imagine them smirking across time, saying, "We told you snails work." As you watch the chamber scene unfold, you see ladies leaning back, their faces gleaming with sticky gold, servants fussing to keep flies at bay. The sound of bees hums faintly from outside, while in small jars snails writhe slowly, their trails harvested for vanity. It's both grotesque and strangely endearing. A reminder that even in the Middle Ages people reached into the natural world with curiosity, hoping it might lend them beauty. And as you think back, you remember the mouse fur brows from before. Glue, fur, slime, honey. It seems every part of the natural world, from rodents to insects to snails, could be conscripted in the war against imperfection. You sigh, amused and a little horrified. Beauty, it seems, has always been sticky business. The torches sputter, shadows curling along the stone walls, and you find yourself drawn toward a hearth at the edge of a medieval chamber. The fire crackles, its warmth chasing the chill, but what really catches your eye is the bowl resting beside it. A handful of almonds, charred black over the flames, have been ground into fine soot. The powder gleams faintly in the firelight, ready to be brushed along eyelids. Burnt almonds, transformed into eyeliner. Suddenly the flicker of the hearth isn't just comfort, it's cosmetics. Women of the Middle Ages sought eyes that looked larger, darker, and more defined, the better to command attention across candlelit halls. And with no modern pencils or powders, they turned to what they had: the ashes of burnt nuts, charcoal from the hearth, or even lampblack scraped from candle soot. These were mixed with oils or animal fat to form a dark paste, carefully painted along the lash line with sticks or tiny brushes. The effect: a smoky shadow that made eyes pop even in dimly lit rooms. It wasn't entirely invention of their own. The tradition reached back to ancient Egypt, where kohl was a staple, both cosmetic and medicinal, believed to ward off infection and evil spirits. By the Middle Ages, that practice had travelled through trade and translation. In Europe, the idea survived in adapted forms, with burnt almonds being a humble yet effective substitute. Imagine a noblewoman leaning close to a bronze mirror, carefully smearing the blackened paste, steadying her hand while servants held the light steady. Historians still argue whether these burnt almond eyeliners were common among everyday women or remained mostly an elite practice. Some claim peasants could just as easily make them from soot and ash, while others argue that the refinement of the mixture, adding oils, grinding finely, suggests a more courtly environment. The debate continues, leaving you to picture both possibilities: a duchess in her chamber and a farm girl by her hearth, each darkening her lashes with the same fire-born recipe. Mainstream physicians actually praised some of these eye-darkening recipes, claiming they could protect against the glare of the sun and strengthen weak eyes. It sounds absurd, but there's a kernel of truth. Kohl and soot might have had mild antibacterial effects and their shading reduced brightness. Whether it worked or not, the look was captivating enough to keep the practice alive. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some recipes mixed burnt almond powder with bat droppings or wine lees to achieve a smoother texture. Imagine the apothecary's bench, a mortar full of scorched nuts, a pinch of guano, a splash of sour wine, and voila, eyeliner fit for a queen. The smell alone must have been a trial, but when smeared along the lashes, the result was striking, mysterious, even a little dangerous looking. The sensory experience was part of the ritual. The smoky smell of charred almonds lingered faintly on the fingers, the oily paste cooled against the delicate eyelid, and the darkness framed the eye in a way that seemed to magnify its sparkle. Picture the flicker of torchlight catching the sheen, eyes suddenly more dramatic, lashes lengthened by the illusion of shadow. No wonder admirers leaned closer, whispering compliments, perhaps too entranced to notice the faint smell of ash. Of course, humour has its place here. Imagine getting caught in the rain after carefully applying your burnt almond liner, only to have it smear down your cheeks in streaks of black. Or worse, imagine blinking too hard during the application and ending up with smudges that made you look less mystical sorceress and more chimney sweep. Some medieval banquets must have been filled with smudged stairs, all in the name of allure. One account whispers of noble ladies darkening not just their eyes but also their lashes with burnt almond oil, dipping tiny brushes and coating each lash individually. Did it work? Perhaps for a time, but you can picture the frustration when clumps stuck together, or when the oily mixture stung, turning your dramatic gaze into a squint. Beauty rarely came without discomfort, and yet the fashion carried meaning. Dark, defined eyes suggested mystery and seduction, qualities both admired and feared. Religious voices sometimes condemned the practice, calling it vanity or even witchcraft. The darkened gaze could be seen as deceptive, a tool to ensnare men. Scholars still debate whether these critiques reflected genuine fear of cosmetics, or were just another way to control women's expressions. Either way, to paint your eyes in shadow was to risk whispers of sorcery. Think back to the mercury eye drops. You already know medieval eyes were dangerous territory. First poison for sparkle, now soot for seduction. Together they reveal a truth. In every age, the eyes were treated as the stage upon which beauty played its boldest tricks. As the fire crackles lower, you see the women gathered around, passing the charred almonds, grinding, mixing, laughing quietly as they line one another's eyes. Their faces glow with candlelight, their eyes suddenly sharp, dark, mesmerizing. In that moment, it doesn't matter whether it's dangerous or smelly or strange. The look is worth it. The illusion of enchantment, the fleeting power of a gaze sharpened by smoke. And you, centuries later, can't help but smile at the thought. From burnt almonds to eyeliner pencils, the ritual continues, as old as firelight itself. The hall grows quieter now, the torches low, the music faint in the distance. You find yourself standing near a small carved chest, its lid propped open to reveal delicate wafers, pale and smooth as pressed petals. They look harmless, almost like thin candies you might slip onto your tongue at a feast. But these were no sweets. They were arsenic wafers, tiny poisonous tablets taken in the hope of whitening the skin from the inside out. To medieval minds, beauty wasn't only painted on from the outside. Some believed it could be swallowed, digested, and transformed into radiance. These wafers, often made of flour, sugar, and trace amounts of arsenic, were marketed as miracle cures for blotchy skin, freckles, or redness. Pop one onto your tongue, let it dissolve, and supposedly your complexion would grow whiter and clearer. Imagine the chilling irony, consuming poison to appear more alive. Historians still argue whether these wafers were widely consumed in the Middle Ages, or whether they flourished more in later Renaissance courts. The records are blurry, but enough references appear in medical warnings and whispered satire to suggest they weren't entirely imaginary. Physicians cautioned against foreign sweets that pale the skin at the cost of health. Chroniclers muttered about noblewomen wasting away, praised for their delicate beauty even as illness crept through their veins. Mainstream medical theory didn't encourage arsenic use. In fact, many texts warned that arsenic was a deadly venom of the earth. Yet paradoxically, the very danger gave it a lure. If a little caused harm, might not a tiny pinch create dramatic results? The line between medicine and poison blurred, as it often did. People believed arsenic might purge the body of its impurities, driving out redness the way fire cleanses metal. The result, a pallor that was, ironically, both fashionable and symptomatic of poisoning. Here's a strange tidbit. Some recipes disguised arsenic wafers as medicinal lozenges, flavoured with herbs like fennel or mint to mask the bitter taste. Imagine a noblewoman slipping one discreetly at a banquet, her rivals thinking she's freshening her breath when in fact she's dosing herself with poison. Later, she smiles faintly, her skin pale, her eyes glassy. Admirers swoon over her fragile beauty, never realising it's literally killing her softly. The sensory experience was deceptive. On the tongue, the wafer would dissolve like a sweet. The the sugar masking the faint bitterness. Moments later, a metallic aftertaste might linger, a sign of the danger hidden within. Days later, the skin might look smoother, paler, but soon enough came the side effects: stomach cramps, dizziness, brittle hair. Still, to those trapped in the endless pursuit of whiteness, the risk seemed invisible, especially when praise at court drowned out the warnings. Imagine the scene in a chamber. A noblewoman instructs her maid to fetch the beauty wafers, pressing one delicately to her lips. The maid hesitates, whispering, "But my lady, the physician forbids it." The nobleman silences her with a glance. Better a pale death than a ruddy life. Vanity and defiance rolled into one gesture. Of course, humour lurks even in the macabre. Picture a nobleman accidentally snatching one of the wafers from the wrong tray, popping it in his mouth and gagging at the strange aftertaste. The lady tries to hide her panic, murmuring, "That was a very rare sweet." His evening takes a dramatic downturn, while the court buzzes with gossip. Some accounts claim arsenic wafers were imported luxuries, whispered about in hushed tones as Venetian confections. Whether true or not, the association with foreign mystery only heightened their allure. To have such wafers was to flaunt wealth and daring. After all, not everyone was willing to gamble their life for their looks. Scholarly debates ask the obvious. Did women truly believe in their effectiveness, or was it more about the symbolism of self-sacrifice? Perhaps arsenic wafers functioned like a secret oath, a way of saying, "I will endure anything, even poison, to remain beautiful." The act itself became a performance, a declaration of dedication. Think back now to the vinegar baths, the mercury eye drops, the lead masks. All were applied to the skin, painful but external. With arsenic wafers, the ritual turns inward, poisoning the very body to produce a fragile outward illusion. It's both horrifying and strangely logical, the ultimate step in chasing perfection. If beauty comes from within, then even within must be sacrificed. The sensory picture lingers as you stand by that carved chest. Pale wafers stacked neatly, their smooth surfaces hiding their lethal contents. A hand reaches out, takes one, places it on the tongue with practiced ease. Around her, the chamber's alive with music and gossip. To everyone else, she looks radiant. Only you know the truth. She glows because she's fading. And as the torches flicker, you sense the lesson whispered across time. Beauty can be as much about danger as desire, a delicate dance between admiration and destruction. The chamber air shifts again, no longer filled with the sweetness of honey or the bitter edge of arsenic. Instead, there's a sharp, acrid tang that makes you instinctively wrinkle your nose. You hear the splash of water in a wooden basin, the scrape of a comb, and then the unmistakable sound of liquid poured from a clay jug. The smell confirms it. Urine. Yes, medieval hair tonics often included the very thing you'd least expect and least desire poured onto your head in the name of beauty. The goal was golden, glossy hair, a symbol of health and desirability. Pale, shining locks reflected youth and nobility, while dull or dark hair was often dismissed as common or plain. So, women turned to an unusual rinse, human or even animal urine thought to bleach, soften and strengthen. The logic? Urine contained ammonia-like compounds that could, in fact, lighten hair. It wasn't completely baseless science. It just wasn't exactly pleasant. Imagine leaning over a basin while your maid carefully poured warm liquid through your tresses, assuring you that the stench would fade, though it rarely did completely. Historians still argue whether this practice was limited to rural folk remedies, or whether it actually made its way into noble households. Some insist it was a common recipe among apothecaries, who mixed urine with herbs and alum to create hair waters. Others argue it was mocked in satire and therefore exaggerated. Either way, the possibility alone is enough to make you shudder. Mainstream medieval belief often treated urine as medicinal. Physicians tested it for diagnosis, seeing in its colour and scent signs of health or disease. If it could reveal the body's secrets, why shouldn't it also heal or beautify? Manuals suggested it could cleanse the scalp, fight lice, and brighten dull hair. In a time before shampoos or conditioners, urine was the closest thing to a chemical treatment. And here's a curious tidbit. Some women swore by horse urine specifically, claiming it had stronger bleaching power. Others insisted the urine of young boys was most effective. supposedly purer, less tainted by age or indulgence. Picture the absurdity. Noble households instructing servants to collect chamber pots at dawn for the lady's beauty regimen. The dignity of the upper classes, you realise, was often more fragile than their hair. The sensory experience was something no scented herbs could fully disguise. Imagine the warm splash against your scalp, trickling down your neck, mingling with strands of hair. The stinging scent filled the chamber, clinging to towels and combs. Servants would try to mask it with rosemary water or rose petals, but underneath it all lingered the acrid truth. And yet, when the hair dried in the sun, it gleamed faintly lighter, the texture softer, proof enough to continue the ritual. Now picture the humour of the situation. A lady steps into the hall, hair gleaming golden, her rivals whispering, "Ah, she shines tonight." Meanwhile, the gentleman closest to her sniffs the air, puzzled by the faint barnyard tang he can't quite place. Or imagine a miscommunication in the household, the chamber pot mistakenly swapped with the vinegar jug, leading to some very unfortunate seasoning at dinner. Medieval life had its comic disasters, even in beauty. The practice wasn't entirely without merit. Modern science tells you that ammonia in urine does indeed have bleaching properties, which is why it was also used in early textile processing and cleaning. But while cloth might be whitened, the scalp endured irritation, dryness, and infection risks. Medieval manuals warned against overuse, noting that hair might fall as wheat under scythe if rinses were too frequent. The pursuit of radiance carried the same danger as so many other medieval tricks. Short-term gain, long-term ruin. Scholars debate whether men also adopted the practice. Some suggest knights returning from travel bleached their hair to look more youthful and appealing. Others dismiss it, saying such rituals were more tied to female vanity. Perhaps the truth lies in the middle. Vanity knows no gender, especially where status is at stake. As you imagine the chamber, you see servants holding combs, carefully untangling wet strands, whispering encouragement while holding their breath. The lady sits, eyes closed, envisioning herself radiant in the feast hall, golden locks shimmering beneath jewelled headdresses. She doesn't care about the smell or the discomfort. She only cares about the reflection in her mirror the next morning. And you, watching centuries later, can't help but see the parallels. Modern salons still use harsh chemicals to bleach and dye, their acrid smell filling the air. You might wrinkle your nose at medieval urine tonics, but walk into a modern hairdresser's and you'll recognise the same sharp sting of ammonia. Different vessels, same pursuit. Think back now to the arsenic wafers. Poison taken in, stench poured on, each ritual layering another risk onto the body. Beauty was relentless, demanding not only money and time, but comfort and dignity. You may laugh at the absurdity, but you also sense the seriousness. In a world where appearance could decide a marriage, an alliance, even survival, no potion was too strange to try. So you sit with them in that chamber, the acrid air thick around you, hair dripping into wooden basins. It's grotesque, it's comical, and yet, in its own way, it's timeless. Beauty always asks you to endure something, whether it's a sting, a smell, or a sacrifice. The chamber quiets, and this time the air is filled not with acrid scents, but with the heady perfume of herbs steeped in wine. On a long wooden table, bundles of dried plants lie waiting, fennel stalks, sprigs of rosemary, the dark, twisted roots of mandrake, and little jars of powders with labels fading in ink. You step closer, and it becomes clear. These were the medieval herbs of seduction, strange plant brews and potions meant to enhance beauty, lure lovers, or even enchant the unsuspecting. Herbal lore dominated the Middle Ages. Physicians, midwives, and wise women alike swore by plants as both medicine and magic. And when it came to beauty, herbs promised everything from smoother skin to irresistible allure. Fennel water, for example, was splashed across the face to brighten the eyes and soften wrinkles. Women were told to boil fennel in wine and dab the liquid onto their eyelids, believing it would make their gaze sharper, their glance more bewitching. You can almost imagine the sting, the warmth, and the whispered promise. Your eyes will shine like stars tonight. Mandrake root carried a far darker reputation. Shaped vaguely like human figures, it was surrounded by myth, said to scream when pulled from the earth and bring death to those who heard it. But in controlled doses, ground mandrake root was blended into beauty potions. Some believed it gave skin a youthful flush, while others claimed it heightened sensuality, making the wearer more desirable. Historians still argue whether mandrake was actually used as a cosmetic, or whether its role was exaggerated by storytellers eager to paint noble women as dabbling in sorcery. Either way, the image of a lady smearing mandrake salve onto her cheeks before a feast feels both eerie and compelling. Rosemary and lavender, by contrast, were gentler herbs, praised for their cleansing and calming properties. Baths steeped in these plants were said to soften the skin, leave the hair shining, and perfume the body with a freshness rare in an age when bathing was infrequent. But rosemary carried more than a pleasant scent. It was also thought to sharpen memory and ward off evil. Imagine stepping out of such a bath, hair scented, body glowing, and mind convinced you were both beautiful and protected. Now here's a quirky tidbit. Some recipes combined crushed violets with powdered pearls, boiled together in milk. The result was a perfumed lotion thought to smooth skin and make the user pleasing to the eye and sweet to the embrace. You'd spread it across your cheeks and hope that the violet's fragrance covered up the sourness of curdled milk beneath. Beauty was rarely without a little unpleasantness. The sensory picture is vivid. Picture a darkened chamber, the air thick with smoke from drying herbs, the bubbling of cauldrons as wine and water simmer with roots and flowers. The bitter tang of fennel mixes with the sweetness of lavender, while mandrake root gives off a musty, earthy odour. Women dip their fingers into bowls, smoothing pastes onto faces, or sip cautiously from cups, their expressions caught between anticipation and dread. Of course, humour weaves its way in too. Imagine a lady misjudging her dose of fennel wine and blinking wildly through an entire banquet, eyes watering as she insists, "No, truly, I'm radiant." Or a courtier leaning close to a woman who has dabbed too much mandrake salve, only to recoil at the overwhelming earthy stench. Seduction, medieval style, often teetered dangerously between allure and awkwardness. The use of herbs often straddled the line between science and magic. Physicians recorded fennel, rosemary and sage in their medical texts, praising their humoral balance. Yet at the same time, folk healers whispered about mandrake, belladonna and henbane as ingredients in love charms. Was it beauty care, or was it enchantment? Scholars still debate, uncertain whether women truly believed they were casting spells or simply experimenting with nature's pharmacy. And then there's the symbolic weight. Herbs carried meaning in medieval thought. Rosemary for remembrance, violets for modesty, mandrake for lust, lavender for purity. To anoint your body with them wasn't just practical. It was performative, layering your very skin with messages. You walked into the hall not only glowing but signalling, through scent and symbolism, exactly how you wanted to be seen. Think back to the urine hair tonics. Pure practicality, however unpleasant. The herb brews carried something different, mystique. They allowed women to blur the line between natural remedy and magical glamour. Was your glow the result of fennel water, or had you whispered a charm into the brew? Perhaps even your rivals couldn't be sure. The sensory ritual extended beyond skin. Some women carried sachets of herbs tucked into their bodices, so their very presence exuded fragrance. Others rinsed their mouths with mint-infused waters, desperate to keep their breath sweet in a world without toothpaste. Every herb was pressed into service, every leaf a potential ally in the endless war against imperfection. And as you sit in that perfume chamber centuries later, you watch women lean over their bowls, steam curling around their faces, fingers stained green and brown from crushed leaves. They whisper to one another of love, of rivals, of the spells these herbs might weave. It is half medicine, half magic, and wholly fascinating. Beauty crafted from the garden, sharpened by superstition, and wrapped in mystery. The echoes of whispered spells and crushed herbs fade as you find yourself stepping into another world entirely. The warm, damp atmosphere of a medieval bathhouse. The air is thick with steam, curling up toward wooden beams, carrying with it the mingled scents of rosemary, lavender, sweat, and secrets. Here, beauty rituals unfolded not in private chambers but in shared spaces, where skin was bared, voices lowered, and gossip flowed as freely as the water. Bathhouses in medieval towns were more than just places to wash. They were social theatres. You sit quietly on the edge of a stone bench, steam clinging to your hair, and watch as women of every station slip into pools. Nobles sat apart from commoners when possible, but in the misty haze distinctions blurred. Pale shoulders glistened, cheeks flushed with heat, and here, beauty recipes were exchanged like currency. One woman swore by vinegar rinses, another whispered about honey masks, and a third confided in secret herbs boiled into her bath. Historians still argue whether these bathhouses were primarily centres of health, relaxation, or discreet indulgence. Some sources describe them as respectable places of social life, complete with music, attendance, and even refreshments. Others paint them as dens of temptation, where modesty slipped away with the steam. Perhaps they were both, depending on the hour and the clientele. What's certain is that beauty rituals thrived in these spaces, part of a culture that tied physical appearance to both health and morality. The mainstream purpose of a bathhouse was cleansing the body, a rare luxury for those without access to private tubs. Water heated in great cauldrons was poured into stone pools, sometimes infused with herbs or salts. Skin softened in the heat, pores opened, and attendants scrubbed away dirt with cloths or pumice. Afterward, women applied oils or ointments to lock in the glow, leaving with skin that felt, at least briefly, rejuvenated. But here's the quirk. Beauty rituals in bathhouses often became communal spectacles. Recipes were tested openly. One might bring a jar of snail slime to share, another a pot of powdered herbs to sprinkle into the water. Imagine sitting in the pool, knees just breaking the surface, as a neighbour leans over and insists you rub goose fat on your face for smoothness. You nod politely, promising to try, while secretly hoping she keeps her goose fat to herself. The sensory world here was overwhelming. Steam-blurred vision, sweat mingled with perfumes, and the constant trickle of water echoed off stone walls. You hear women laughing, sighing, arguing, trading secrets of both cosmetics and court. The touch of hot water against your skin was soothing, yet beneath it all lurked the faint tang of unwashed bodies, the earthy smell of damp wood, and sometimes the sour bite of vinegar baths poured into the mix. It was beauty wrapped in contradiction, indulgent yet practical, communal yet deeply personal. Of course, humour blossomed in such settings. Imagine a woman slipping on a wet stone floor, her painstakingly applied mouse fur eyebrows floating away in the pool, or the awkwardness of someone's leech from a complexion treatment escaping into the water, swimming merrily past others' legs. Bathhouses must have been filled with such small dramas, half mortifying, half hilarious. Some chronicles hint that nobles used bathhouses as stages for showing off their radiance. Arriving with carefully applied powders or perfumes, they let the steam amplify their glow, then reapplied their beauty recipes afterward while others watched. To be seen in this semi-public ritual was to assert both refinement and wealth. Scholars debate whether this was vanity or necessity, but either way, it turned the bathhouse into a kind of medieval catwalk. Not everyone approved, of course. Religious voices sometimes condemned the bathhouses as breeding grounds of temptation, warning that beauty rituals performed there bordered on vanity or even sin. Yet the popularity endured, proving once again that desire often outweighed doctrine. Women emerged radiant, men emerged refreshed, and gossip spread faster than the steam itself. And here's the callback. You remember the vinegar baths done in private chambers. Here, in the bathhouse, that same sour ritual might be shared, diluted into communal pools, with women wrinkling their noses and laughing as they endured the sting together. Pain softened when shared, just as beauty itself was often a communal performance. Picture the end of the ritual. The women emerge from the baths, skin flushed and glowing, their hair slicked back, their robes damp but fragrant with herbs. They step into the cool night air, carrying with them the mingled scents of lavender, rosemary, and faint sweat. Behind them, the bathhouse hums with whispers that will echo in courts and kitchens alike. For a few hours, beauty has been both a secret and a spectacle, a ritual bound by steam and silence. The steam fades, and you step out beneath the silver night sky. The air is cool, the moon bright, and here the beauty rituals take on a different, almost enchanted rhythm. Imagine a circle of women standing in a meadow, their faces pale in the moonlight, bowls of herbs and oils laid out on a cloth. They murmur softly, waiting for the right phase of the moon before beginning. Tonight you witness charms and moonlight rituals, where beauty was tied to the heavens and skincare mingled with superstition. The moon held immense sway over medieval imagination. Just as it pulled the tides, it was thought to govern the body's fluids, the humours, even the cycles of women's health. If the moon could shape the world, surely it could shape the skin. So women timed their beauty routines by its phases. Waxing moons were for growth and enhancement. Hair tonics applied then were said to make locks thicker. Waning moons were for cleansing. Face masks or vinegar rinses performed then promised to purge blemishes. Imagine watching the sky, bowl in hand, waiting for the exact sliver of silver light to align with your hopes for beauty. Historians still argue whether these moon-timed rituals were widespread practices or the whispers of rural folk traditions woven into later legend. Some insist the records are exaggerations, crafted to mock women's vanity. Others argue that the sheer number of references to lunar cycles in medical and agricultural texts suggests the practice was taken seriously. Perhaps both views hold truth. Superstition and practicality often danced hand in hand. The mainstream role of moonlight in medicine is clear enough. Physicians mapped treatments to the zodiac, aligning bloodletting, herbal tonics, and diets with lunar positions. If medicine was timed to the moon, why not cosmetics? To smear on a honey mask beneath the waxing moon was to enlist the cosmos in your cause, as if the sky itself conspired to grant you radiance. Now here's a quirky tidbit. Some women left bowls of milk or rosewater under the moonlight overnight, believing the liquid would absorb lunar power. In the morning they splashed it across their faces, convinced it held extra potency. You can almost laugh, picturing a maid rushing outside at dawn to rescue the bowl before the neighbour's cat lapped it up. "Quick! That's not your milk, it's beauty magic!" The sensory world of these rituals is hauntingly serene. The cool night air brushing against damp skin, the faint rustle of herbs crushed underfoot, the soft glow of faces turned skyward. A dab of oil mixed with lavender spread across the forehead, the cold press of clay masks applied as chants whispered through the meadow. Unlike the sour sting of vinegar baths or the acrid tang of urine tonics, this ritual felt calm, mystical, and oddly soothing, if you ignored the occasional owl screech reminding you of the darkness. Of course, humour finds its way here too. Imagine a group of women chanting to the moon, only for a passing villager to stumble upon them, wide-eyed, certain he's seen witches mid-ritual. Or picture the frustration of carefully setting out your moon-charged bowl of milk, only to find in the morning that a hedgehog has tipped it over. Even in superstition, mishaps abounded. But beyond the comic accidents, the symbolism mattered. The moon represented femininity, cycles, mystery. To align beauty with lunar phases was to acknowledge that power openly, even defiantly. In a world where male physicians dictated so much of medical thought, women found autonomy in rituals tied to the moon, whispering charms that gave them a sense of control over their bodies and appearances. Scholars debate whether these rituals were true spells or simply poetic traditions, but their persistence in memory suggests they carried deep meaning. Imagine yourself in that meadow now. The silver light washes over your face, highlighting every curve, every flaw you hope to erase. You dab moon-soaked rosewater on your cheeks, feeling the coolness as though the stars themselves had touched your skin. You close your eyes and breathe in the mingled scents of lavender, fennel, and damp grass. Around you, women laugh softly, whisper charms, and wait for beauty to descend like moonlight itself. Think back to the bathhouses, the chatter, the noise, the communal spectacle. Here the opposite unfolds. Quiet, secrecy, intimacy. Beauty is no longer a performance for others, but a whispered pact between you, the earth, and the sky. No one at court might ever know what you did here under the moon, but in your heart you believed it mattered, and in an age where belief often shaped reality, perhaps it truly did. As you watch the ritual unfold, you see women rising slowly, bowls emptied, herbs scattered like offerings. They walk back to their homes with moonlight clinging to their hair, their skin cool, their spirits steadied. Whatever the scholars may say, to them it felt real. And in beauty, feeling has always been half the battle. The meadow fades, the silver moon dissolves, and you find yourself standing at the end of this strange, winding journey. All around you float the echoes of powders and pastes, of fumes, of whispers and warnings. Tonight you've walked through masks of lead, through egg-white lifts, dung sunscreens, leech bowls, vinegar tubs, mercury sparkles, mouse fur brows, snail trails, almond ash shadows, arsenic sweets, urine rinses, herbal charms, bathhouse whispers, and moonlit spells. Each ritual stranger than the last, each one stitched together by the same thread. The relentless pursuit of beauty, no matter the risk. You see now that beauty in the Middle Ages wasn't just vanity, it was survival. To appear pale and polished was to announce wealth, purity, nobility. To show blemishes or roughness was to risk whispers of poverty, illness, even sin. The lengths women went to achieve the ideal seem absurd, but in their world they were logical, even necessary. You can picture the court, flickering with torchlight, where every face gleamed with the labour of poisons and prayers. Behind each glow was danger, behind each shimmer was desire, behind each mask was the unspoken truth. Beauty was power, and power always demanded a price. Historians still argue how much of these tales were reality, and how much were exaggerations told by critics, priests, or satirists. Did noble women truly smear dung, or was it a rumour? Were arsenic wafers a common treat, or a cautionary myth? The debates continue, but the fact that these stories endured tells you something vital. Whether true or twisted, they reflected a world where beauty was imagined as alchemy, half science, half sorcery. And here's the strange legacy. You carry echoes of these rituals even now. Snail slime serums, honey masks, chemical bleaches, acid peels, eyebrow extensions, lash-darkening mascaras. The packaging is prettier, the science sounder, but the impulse is the same. To endure discomfort, risk, even danger, for a fleeting glow. You laugh at mouse fur eyebrows, but microblading needles aren't so far away. You recoil at mercury drops, but lash serums sting with their own unpronounceable chemicals. The mirror has always whispered the same temptation. Just a little more, and you'll be perfect. So, as you stand at the edge of this long path, you see not only medieval women, but also yourself reflected in the bronze mirror of history. The story doesn't end in the bathhouse or under the moon. It stretches forward all the way to your own shelves of bottles and jars. Beauty secrets, strange, dangerous, alluring, never really vanish. They just change costume. And now, as the journey settles, the pace softens, the words grow slower and the air turns gentle. You let the images fade, the lead powders dissolve, the leeches slither back into their jars, the torches dim until only embers remain. The sharp sting of vinegar, the acrid tang of urine, the stickiness of honey and snail trails, they all drift away like smoke rising into night. In their place comes stillness, cool and quiet, wrapping you like a cloak. The women of centuries past return to their chambers, their laughter faint as a distant bell's. The bathhouse grows silent, the steam thinning into morning air. The meadow under the moon empties, the bowls overturned, the herbs scattered to earth. All that remains is the soft echo of their hope, the timeless, aching wish to be seen, admired, loved. You understand them now, not with judgment, but with a kind of tenderness. They were not so different from you, just armed with stranger tools. The rhythm slows, your breathing deepens, the grotesque edges of crocodile dung, mercury tears and arsenic sweets blur into faint curiosities, stories tucked safely away. What lingers is not the danger but the humanity, the fragile beauty of people willing to chase light in the only ways they knew how. You feel the quiet settle around you, the narrative thinning like candle smoke in a still room. Each detail drifts further until it becomes nothing more than a soft memory, a lullaby of oddities from long ago. Let your eyes grow heavy now. Let your mind ease into rest. The story has run its course, and there is no more to chase. Only calm, only night, only sleep, sweet dreams.